City Council member.
And good morning and welcome to today's hybrid joint New York City Council hearing for the Committees on Finance, jointly with Oversight and Investigation. To minimize disruptions, please place all electronic devices to vibrate or silent mode. If you'd like to submit testimony, please send via email to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. Chairs, we are now ready to begin.
So good morning. I'm Gail Brewer, Chair of the Committee on Oversight and Investigations. We're opening this hearing. I'd like to welcome you to our joint oversight hearing today with the Committee on Finance, chaired by my wonderful colleague, Justin Brannan. We all know that since COVID struck, we have placed our city and its finances under a cloud of enormous uncertainty. We've lost untold millions in revenue in the midst of a shutdown, despite all the support from the federal government. And we've seen some prosperity return once we reopened and adapted, but there are so many challenges. We know that New York City shifts fiscal fortunes all the time. It makes it very hard for those of us who are serious policymakers to budget for our city's needs, and the needs are tremendous. Today, we want to get to the bottom of just what federal resources we still have and how we need to use them in the best possible manner. We also know that there's an economic forecast, there's a hint of a coming recession, and it means we need to keep a very close eye on our budget, although we do that anyway. At the same time, if we have access to federal funds, that could soften the blow of any economic decline and hit to city revenues. We need to use as many of these resources as we can to ensure that the city continues providing these very essential services to everybody. We hope that the Office of Management and Budget and the people testifying today can give us a clearer picture of how we have used federal money from the American Rescue Plan and the other two plans and any other sources. We also want to understand how the administration decided to use that aid. What's left? We've never been able to get that from the Department of Education. I know that's another hearing. What obstacles the city has encountered in actually spending this money, and whether any planned budget cuts could be avoided by using currently unbudgeted aid dollars. We're also looking forward, as I mentioned earlier, to an education committee on this topic on November 16th, when we will talk about the federal education aid, which is the largest pot from the federal government. So I'd like to certainly thank the central staff team, Senior Counsel C.J. Murray, Policy Analyst Alex Yablon, and my staff, Leo Bolero in particular. And now I'd like to turn it over to my fabulous colleague, Chair Brannan.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilmember Justin Brannan. I have the privilege of chairing the Committee on Finance. I also want to welcome you to our hearing regarding New York City's spending of federal COVID relief funds. The hearing today will provide our committees with an opportunity to hear from the Office of Management and Budget about the federal funding the city has received in the wake of the COVID pandemic and how that funding has been spent so far, particularly those funds received through the American Rescue Plan Act State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. These funds are the most flexible and how we can use them for the city's economic recovery, so we wanted to start there. At the same time, a significant amount of aid has been received and committed to the Department of Education. As Councilmember Brewer mentioned, because of this, City Council's Committee on Education will hold further hearings, especially on the DOE's use of the COVID federal funding, on a separate hearing on November 16th. On March 11th, 2021, President Biden signed into law the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. It's a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus plan, of which $350 billion was allocated to state, local, and tribal governments to counteract the pandemic's fiscal impact to public budgets. The city received $5.88 billion from this state and local fiscal recovery fund for recovery programs. This is in addition to the $1.45 billion the city received through the Federal Coronavirus Act Relief and Economic Security, the CARES Act assistance package. In total, the city expects to receive approximately $26 billion in pandemic-related federal funding through FY26. The ARPA state and local fiscal recovery funds represent a large portion of the federal relief funds uncommitted by the administration. As of June 2022, $820 million remains uncommitted out of a planned spend of $3.68 billion. SLFRF monies have primarily been utilized for replacing lost city revenues resulting from the pandemic. But ARPA also permits that these dollars go towards infrastructure projects like broadband expansion or other necessary investments that can accelerate New York's ongoing economic recovery. Today we'll have the opportunity to discuss the city's use of these federal resources. This disease has inflicted and continues to inflict deep personal costs on all New Yorkers and a financial burden that we are still grappling with today. Every dollar in assistance we receive is a step closer to rebuilding our homes, our businesses, our communities, and our lives. We can't afford anything less than maximum and efficient use of these resources. We look forward to hearing OMB's testimony and answering our questions about progress in spending the federal funds, how funding for these projects has been prioritized, and how still uncommitted funds can help lessen the financial burden on other necessary city expenditures going forward. Before we begin, I want to thank my committee staff, as always, Michael Toomey, Kathleen Ahn, Jonathan Rosenberg, and my senior advisor, John Yedden, and the council staff from the Committee on Oversight and Investigation for all their hard work behind the scenes in putting this hearing together. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Chair Brewer.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Council Members Barron, Carr, Kagan, Hanks, Lewis, and on Zoom, Ayala, for being here today, and I'll turn it over to CJ Murray.
Thank you, chairs. We'll now hear testimony from the Office of Management and Budget. Before we begin, I will administer the affirmation. Panelists, please raise your right hands. I'll read the affirmation once and then call on each of you individually to respond. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions? Christopher Blanco.
I do.
James Bristow.
I do.
Thank you. You may begin.
Good morning, Chairs Brannan, Brewer, members of the Finance and Oversight and Investigation Committees, and members of the City Council. My name is Christopher Blanco. I am the Associate Director for Budget Resources and Recovery Grants Management at the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget. My responsibilities include oversight and management of the city's federal COVID-19 relief funds. I'm joined by my colleague, James Bristow, Deputy Assistant Director and Intergovernmental Relations Counsel. In March 2020, New York City became the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic, an unprecedented event that presented new healthcare and fiscal challenges to governments across the country. On top of the pandemic's terrible human costs, the economic crisis caused the city to lower revenue forecasts by billions of dollars while simultaneously incurring billions of dollars in unplanned costs related to fighting the virus and protecting the health and safety of New Yorkers. In response to the unprecedented financial emergency faced by states and localities nationwide, the federal government allocated grants that supported a wide variety of urgent needs. This funding was critical to our COVID response and has been key to the recovery, in part because the programs were designed to give states and localities great flexibility in using and reallocating funds. The primary source of stimulus dollars were the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, Coronavirus Relief Funds, or CARES CRF, and the American Rescue Plan State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, or ARP SLFRF, which directed nearly $340 billion and $350 billion, respectively, to states and localities and tribal governments across the country to support their response to and recovery from COVID-19 public health emergency. New York City was allocated $1.45 billion in CARES funds. While this was appreciated, did not cover the city's extensive needs. The $5.88 billion in ARPA funds has had a far greater impact on our survival and recovery. CARES funds have already been expended, and we must use ARPA funds by the end of 2024. The federal government's COVID-19 grant programs are unprecedented in both size and scope, and the speed at which they were implemented. We've adapted in real time, which has led to changes in both budgeting and allocations. Fortunately, as I have noted, these funds are designed to be used and allocated flexibly, and we have moved quickly to move funds as needed. OMB plays a critical role in the federal grant funding process. our staff work closely with federal entities and agency partners to navigate the shifting eligibility requirements that accompany the various funding streams. We ensure that the city follows allocation, spending, compliance, and reporting guidelines, and make sure funds are applied in a fiscally responsible manner. Our fiscal goals are to maximize grant awards, cover as much of our city's COVID-19 costs as possible, minimize or avoid cuts to city services, and pursue the least administratively burdensome programs. Finally, I would like to discuss the city's effort to publish stimulus allocations and spending. On March 1st, 2022, OMB launched a web-based funding tracker as required by local law. The tracker describes each of the major funding sources and provides allocation and programmatic information. We also link to spending data submitted to the Open Data Portal and ARP-related reports filed with the Treasury Department. The site can be accessed through OMB's homepage. This data supporting the tracker is updated quarterly based upon available information. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I now look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. One question that I should know the answer to, which is, I was in the federal office for Dinkins, and we always want to have money go directly to the city. And I should know this. I think in past, it was only CDBG that went directly. So all this money did not go through the state. It went directly to the city?
So I think with regards to the COVID funding, there's more than 35 different grant funding streams. I think each of them function a little bit differently. With regards to FEMA, which is the largest funding stream, that does pass through the state, and the New York State Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services is the state grantor, and we're a subgrantee. For the stimulus dollars, namely the CARES Act CRF and the American Rescue Plan state and local fiscal recovery funds, we are a direct recipient, so that funding flows directly to us.
Okay, that's good news. So as I understand it, and you mentioned this, 13.3 billion was given to the city through the American Rescue Plan, ARPA, and the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations, which is CRSA. According to the IBO, and they have a tracker also, the total amount spent as of now is 8.7 billion. So by the calculation of the staff, it means that 4.6 billion of ARPA and CRSA are currently available to be spent. Now, you may disagree or agree with these numbers, but the real issue for us is what's been spent and what still needs to be spent.
Thank you, Council Member, for the question. I can't speak specifically to the numbers that are reflected on the IBO chart.
Right, so you can give us your numbers.
Sure. As it relates to the education funding specifically, that's something we would have to defer to the Department of Education on.
Okay, and we're going to do that on the 16th.
Yep, understood.
Okay.
With regards to the state and local fiscal recovery funds, of the $5.88 billion, 3.9 billion has been spent to date, 3.9 billion has been spent as of the end of fiscal year 22, with the remainder of 1.9 billion to be spent.
Okay, how much to be spent, I'm sorry?
1.9 billion.
Okay, and how are we going to spend that? How is that, is it allocated, is it to be allocated? What's the status?
It's a combination of the two, right? So again, OMB, as part of our normal financial plan process, is currently working with all of our agencies to understand needs across the city, whether that's for coronavirus or other related costs. And so it's roughly $920 million that is yet to be allocated, but is being considered as part of the overall financial plan process.
Okay, so that would go into the next fiscal year, you think? Because it obviously has to be done by '24.
I think it's sort of up to discussion about when that funding will actually be sort of allocated to programs. We certainly feel comfortable meeting all of the grant spending deadlines before the end of calendar year 2024. As we've discussed, the program is really designed to be utilized flexibly, so it does allow us a lot of leeway in sort of moving costs around within the city's budget. And as we stated, we are constantly sort of evaluating the overall needs throughout the city across all of our sister agencies.
Okay, so it's 120 million. Councilmember Brandon?
Thank you. So what role does OMB play in monitoring the COVID spending for the city agencies?
So thank you for your question, Council Member. Specifically, my team is responsible for the overall management of that funding. And so when we're talking about federal grants, again, 35 different funding streams, all of them with different rules and regulations. When you compare that to what we saw with Hurricane Sandy, which I think is a little bit apples to oranges, but is the most recent large-scale disaster. I think we have a much more broad, expansive number of grant programs, which creates a lot of challenges in sort of understanding what the rules are and working with our agencies. So a lot of the work that we do is around compliance and corresponding sort of training guidance to agencies about the different federal funding requirements. Again, every grant program has a different story to tell, but I think specifically for the ARP, while there is a lot of broad flexibility on the what we can spend the money on, there still is a lot of information that agencies need to be aware of in order to comply with the various federal requirements. So those range the gamut from reporting. As we mentioned, a lot of the information that's up on our COVID funding tracker is based upon a lot of the federal reporting requirements and timelines that are out there. There's a lot of information that federal grantors are interested in as it relates to things like procurement, understanding contract structures, procurement rules, how things were procured. So we follow what is known as, and I apologize, it's a little dry, but it's known as 2 CFR Part 200. It's the OMB Super Circular. I think its full name is the Uniformed Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards. This is sort of the main federal regulation that governs federal grants. And so again, I think we focus a lot on the how we're spending that money, right? Which is, I think, as we've said in our testimony, I think there are really 2 big guiding principles when we're looking at federal funding. One, maximizing our awards. As I mentioned, lots of different funding streams. Different funding fits certain programs better than others, and our main goal is to secure as much federal resources as possible. But I think a really important piece of the work that we do at OMB is really looking at how we efficiently utilize those dollars, right? Which is certain projects present certain hurdles and requirements that may require a lot of additional work on behalf of our agency and behalf of the city. Our priority is to make those dollars go as far as we possibly can, right? We want to devote our federal resources, which are limited, to fund programs directly as much as possible and not have those dollars be siphoned off for things like overhead and consultants and things of that nature. So we're very much focused on how we can be most efficient in allocating those dollars. And again, lots of different funding streams, lots of different rules. So the major focus is around sort of complying with the federal regulations so that we're not just securing as many dollars as we can, but we're holding on to those dollars and not having to give them back through audits or other issues in the future.
And how is the progress tracked? Are agencies submitting periodic reports of how the spending is going?
So definitely getting periodic reports from agencies. There's a lot of different processes internal within both OMB and with our city agencies to manage this funding. I think since the beginning of February of 2020, we've issued guidance to agencies about how to categorize COVID spending across a variety of the different federal funding streams. As I said, federal funding for COVID-19 is really a sort of patchwork quilt of lots of different funding streams. So it's definitely been a challenge in sort of implementing those programs while we're sort of building the plan while we're flying it. So we work with our agencies to make sure that we're categorizing budget codes and information correctly so that it's fed into our grants management system. We use our grants management system, which receives a feed from FISA with a lot of the FMS data, so a lot of the financial information, in order to sort of package it in the various ways that the federal grantors are interested in. And we also add additional information as it relates to backup documentation, contracts, invoices, payroll records, things of that nature, so that there's a holistic record of all of the costs that are being supported by our grant programs. So, there's sort of a daily sort of data sort of input that goes into our grants management system. We're constantly reviewing that, and that's on top of sort of the regular check-ins that we have around sort of the quarterly and annual reporting deadlines that are required by the federal government. So it's a long way of saying we are constantly in communication with all of our agencies all of the time. It's a daily process that we are looking at all of the spending, and if something doesn't look right, we are reaching out to them immediately, because I think the lessons that we've learned in managing federal funding, starting 10 years ago with Hurricane Sandy, has really been to develop upfront procedures and doing things right on the front end, rather than doing twice as much work on the back end trying to untangle the mess.
Just for the record again, so overall, we've received $13.3 billion. And what's left now is how much?
Again, so the piece that I'm able to speak to is related specifically to the state and local fiscal recovery funds, which is the $5.88 billion within the ARPA. With regards to the education-specific pieces, I'd have to defer to DOE on the current progress for that allocation.
So what's the number? How much is left?
For the $5.88 billion, 3.9 spent, 1.9 still remaining to be spent.
Okay. Is there concern from OMB about money that was allocated by the previous, or decisions that were made by the previous administration, particularly around any, temporary money that was allocated towards permanent programs?
I think I can't speak too much to the decisions around the previous administration, and what the sort of policy decisions were around there. I think largely my role within OMB is to look at it from more of a technical perspective. Again, trying to understand what's permissible under the federal rules and regulations, and again, also trying to understand how we can manage those things efficiently. As we stated before, with regards to sort of the ARP funds, I think we have to sort of take a step back and look at the city's entire budget process, right? The ARP funding decisions don't really happen in a vacuum, right? ARP funding is, ARP is a tool in our toolbox. It is part of our discussions around every financial plan to evaluate agencies' needs across the board, and to really identify what the right funding stream is and the right fit for those types of costs. And again, we sort of go back to those guiding principles about trying to maximize total federal resources, and also efficiently manage those funds. So, I think if you're trying to get an understanding of the city's overall recovery plans and what the full picture looks like, I don't think you can look solely at the ARP pieces. I think you have to look at sort of the larger financial plan as a whole. But we're certainly happy to continue those conversations and work with the City Council to understand what priorities are, so that when we are having those discussions about how to allocate funding within the financial plan process, whether that's city tax levy or that is through the ARP state and local fiscal recovery funds, we understand what our shared goals are and what the priorities are in order to achieve those goals.
Of that 1.9, how much of it is the cursor blinking, and how much of it has been earmarked for programs?
I think a lot of with regards to the 1.9, obviously, as mentioned in sort of some of the opening comments, the city faces some real challenging times. There's some, concerning things in the horizon economically. Those are resources that are being, again, considered as part of our overall financial planning process. Again, I can't speak to specific plans for that funding as it moves forward, but it is, a resource that we're looking at in regards to future financial plans. I think broadly, we feel very comfortable about meeting all of the spending deadlines as it's associated with the sort of end of 2024 end date. But again, I think, this is one tool within our toolbox in addressing the variety of challenges that we as a city face in recovering from coronavirus, in facing, a broader global economic situation. So,
When OMB talks about upcoming budget shortfalls, are you including the 1.9 baked into that?
I'd have to defer to my colleagues who are, I think, a little bit more aware of the specific allocations as it relates to the shortfalls. Again, I think with regards to the city's approach to financial plans, I think we're broadly trying to look at being more fiscally responsible as we move forward with the coming economic crises. So certainly looking at all sources of funding when sort of attempting to figure out sort of the city's game plan as it relates to trying to be fiscally responsible in the shifting economic climate.
Okay, Gail.
So I'm sorry to keep harping on this. So the 1.9 is understandably to be spent, but you also mentioned 120 million to be allocated. Is that within the 1.9?
I believe the figure is 920 million, and
900
that's within the 1.9.
Okay. Then the other question is, just in terms of following in, I think it's sometimes difficult to figure out how the COVID funding has been budgeted and spent because of a lack of segregation of expenditures within FMS by funding source. So do agencies commingle federal and city funds with budget codes, and how have you, even you, been able to figure out what's federal and what's city, and how can we get more clarity on the COVID relief funds and how they are budgeted? Now, maybe that's all within your tracker. I tried to figure that out, but I could not. So can you just explain the commingling, if it exists or not?
Sure, and thank you, Councilmember, for the question. I think it is certainly something that we look at constantly, right? I think this administration is very much interested in transparency, and I think it's been really sort of demonstrated by the enhancements that we've made to the tracker from the beginning of this year. Back in March, again, as we noted, we launched a much more interactive, in-depth tracker that provides full detail about all the different federal funding streams that we're receiving around COVID-19 funding. As part of the work that we're doing, again, we're working with agencies on the budget side in order to try to segregate all of the COVID costs as best as possible, and then taking that information, feeding it into our grants management system to be able to sort of separate the costs between each of the grant funding streams. There's a lot of challenges in that. As I mentioned, we look to the past to really inform our process in managing these grant funds. Again, a little bit of apples to oranges when we compare Hurricane Sandy to the COVID response. Obviously, we're talking about close to $10 billion more in federal funding compared to what we saw in Hurricane Sandy. Again, also seeing somewhere in the neighborhood of about almost 3 dozen different funding streams compared to roughly a dozen funding streams for Sandy, where I think 95% of the funding is really segregated in these 2 grant funding streams. So part of the challenge has been in sort of dealing with that patchwork quilt that we speak of with all the federal funding. And some of that is really tied to the fact that most of our programs are funded with a variety of different costs, right? Or a variety of different grants. So every grant has, while I think we're talking mainly about the ARP dollars that, are very broad in how we can utilize them, some of the other grant funds are very, very specific in the types of costs that we can utilize funding for. So again, we're certainly happy to work with you and your staff to, try to figure out how we can be more transparent within our COVID funding tracker. Again, a lot of this is structured in a way that is built around the way the federal grantors are really interested in looking at that funding and recognize that that may not always be the best way for us to communicate with the council as well as the public. So we're definitely open to feedback on how we can improve that tracker, and we continue to want to invest time and resources into actually doing that. So happy to continue that conversation.
Okay. I mean, there are 2 things. I mean, I hope that in the near future you could provide the council with how much relief funding has been spent in each agency and the expense type. And then just in terms of the tracker, I think it's quarterly now. I believe that's when it.
That's correct.
So, again, we don't want more work that isn't helpful, but it might be helpful to us to have it on a more frequent basis. But would you be able in the near future to give us a breakdown of how much funding, relief funding, has been spent in each agency and the expense type? Would that be something you could do?
I think that's something that we can work with you on to see, what's practical here. I certainly think that there's an opportunity for us to do more here, and we're certainly open to feedback on how we can do that.
Okay. I do want to recognize Councilmember Velasquez, Williams, Osei, Farias, Brooks, Powers, Hudson, and now Councilmember. Do you want to go ahead with another question?
I just wanted to dig in once more on, if we're looking at a $4.2 billion projected hole for FY24, those are your numbers. This $1.9 billion, I'm assuming, can be used to plug that hole, right?
So just to follow up on, I guess, the earlier question, so the 1.9 billion in available federal funds are accounted for in the gap calculation. So those funds are already accounted for in the overall calculation of the outstanding gaps in the out years.
So the $4.2 billion gap includes the 1.9 has been allocated elsewhere. It's not sitting there waiting to be filled in.
I think at the top line, sort of, it's sort of in the calculation. Again, the 1.9, some of it has been allocated specifically to programs already, and those were done as part of sort of the initial allocations that were set up when the funding was first awarded. But still sort of, looking at overall needs across the board and which ones sort of fit within the different funding streams.
But is attention being paid to, once this 1.9 is spent, it's really gone, right? So is attention being paid to where we're are we allocating this money to permanent programs?
I would maybe take a step back in the way that we're looking at the overall budget as it relates to the ARP funds. Again, I certainly understand the concerns about this funding dropping out in future fiscal years and what are our plans around funding those programs. Again, there's so many different programs that are supported by the ARP dollars. It's hard to really paint a picture that is simple to explain at times. I think with regards to some programs, certainly the needs of those programs have faded, right? I look at things like the vaccine program, the vaccine incentive programs. Those are things that were needed at the time but may no longer be needed with regards to our response to COVID-19. We look at other programs, something like T2, which has evolved a lot since the beginning of the pandemic to what it looks like now. T2 is supported with, again, a variety of different federal funding streams. So not just the ARP funding, but additionally funding for FEMA, funding through the CDC. And while I think some of the needs there are diminishing as the pandemic continues to evolve, we have been able to sort of identify other federal funding streams through the CDC in order to support that. But ultimately, I would really defer to DOHMH and H&H to talk a little bit more about that. And I know there is another hearing to discuss just the overall public health response around COVID-19. But as we said, we're holistically looking at all the needs across city agencies and trying to understand, what are our priorities as an administration and what are the priorities of the council in order to make funding decisions. And, that is agnostic in many ways to, whether this is going to be city tax levy or this is going to be ARP funds. I think it's constantly the work of the administration to understand what are the needs of the public and how can we best meet those needs. And those things change over time. So that is part of every financial plan process. And we welcome council's partnership in working to sort of understand priorities and how we can sort of meet those shared goals.
I guess when we hear this number, we always think we have no affordable housing. So how could we use the $920 million for affordable housing? Because my question is, just in terms of a revenue replacement, it's my understanding that some of it anyway went to the fire department, understandably, correction, sanitation, rather than across all agencies. So I'm just wondering how agencies are selected. Is it that they submit requests, sort of new needs in terms of COVID to OMB? How do these decisions get made? Because if I had my druthers, I would take this money right now and use it for affordable housing.
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question.
I know I'm a pain in the neck, but that's what I would do. Go ahead.
I certainly appreciate the comment.
Right now, 920 million. I can convert a lot of buildings. I got this number embedded in my head. Go ahead.
Sure. So I think, again, maybe taking a little bit of a step back and looking at the overall sort of federal framework around COVID support, right? I think with regards to what really is unique about the ARP compared to some of the other federal funding streams is this concept of revenue replacement. I think when we're talking about, I guess what is the sort of other stimulus dollars, the traditional stimulus dollars that people think about, which was, mentioned in the testimony, which is the CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund. One of the challenges that we faced in utilizing that funding was that it could only be utilized for new programs that are directly related to the COVID-19
No, I understand.
response.
It's funny how you could make these things stretch.
Right. So it's certainly challenging there. I think a big thing that our congressional delegation fought very hard for was this revenue replacement idea, which allows us to sort of maintain service levels across the board, right? And with regards to, again, looking at allocations, right? I would sort of challenge the idea that, when we look at like an FDNY who did receive a large allocation, a DSNY who did receive an allocation, particularly when it relates to the revenue replacement, I wouldn't look at it like, FDNY is losing and FDNY is winning and HPD is losing, right?
Okay.
I think largely, again, we're looking at the budget holistically and trying to understand, how do we maintain our services, right? And so with regards, again, going back to sort of our guiding principles about trying to maximize the overall amount of federal funding, trying to efficiently manage the federal funding as much as possible, some of those costs and some of the projects that were funded were selected because it's easier for us to not waste dollars trying to administer the programs, but spending those dollars directly to maintain services. And it's significantly easier to do that within 3 large chunks and say 3 large agencies than spreading it into smaller chunks across 50 agencies. And overall, all of our agencies benefit because it's allowing us to avoid reductions in service and to keep the budget balanced.
Okay, I mean, I hear you, I understand that. It just, when the need is so great in other areas, it's hard to not see that there's funding. That's the problem. And then my last question, although I know my colleagues have many, again, thinking into the future, obviously Chicago did apparently, I don't know this for a fact except what you said, others, violence interrupters. And so I'm just wondering, we did need to get hit harder, so we needed to make up for some of the revenue because other cities didn't have the same level of COVID. But I guess what you're also saying is for the future, we're still gonna talk about revenue replacement. We wanna know what's gonna happen next, I guess.
Again, it would sort of go back to sort of the core principles that we sort of look at federal funding with. Ultimately, again, we want to try to maximize the amount of federal resources that we get and to, again, use it as efficiently as possible. I can't speak to how any other municipality is choosing to utilize their ARP allocation.
Chicago's not doing great with their public safety issues, so it might not have worked out. Go ahead.
No, understood. And as you noted, we have a different situation than Chicago, who has a different situation than LA. I think the real benefit of the program is that it is so flexible that it allows us to sort of marry sort of our specific needs to those funding streams. I can't speak to any specific decisions around future allocations, but certainly know that public safety is an issue that is of high priority to the administration. And again, I think we're looking at all of the options that are on the table in order to address the challenges that we're facing. So again, I don't think we look at it necessarily from, ARP money, how do we spend this to address public safety or public housing? I think we're looking with the administration across all of our agencies, looking at what the needs are and what the priorities are in order to sort of meet the needs of the public. And then sort of understanding after we've decided what our priorities are, how to fund those best with the resources that we have available.
Thank you, Councilmember Brennan.
I just want to put a finer point on something before we turn over to our colleagues. I mean, I think my biggest concern is that a portion of the federal COVID funding was allocated for recurring expenses, not necessarily, like Gail mentioned, not necessarily linked to the pandemic directly. And these are expenses that are going to continue past the expiration date for the usage of the federal funds. So the council's concern is that, according to most economic outlooks, including your own at OMB, we don't foresee much growth in the city's revenue over the next few years, in addition to recent levels of inflation, which have also reduced our purchasing power. So the concern here is that I think at the time when these funds were budgeted, the administration at the time stated that they expected that by the time the federal funds had expired, that city, Happy Days would be here again, and the city's revenues would have grown to a point that the city would have enough of its own funds to replace the expiring federal funds, which we now know is not the case. So could you provide us with a summary of how much federal relief dollars currently planned is allocated for recurring expenses that would continue on past the expiration of the federal dollars?
Sure. Thank you, Council Member, for, I think, continue to sort of make an important point around the usage of funding around recurring expenses. It's certainly something that we're happy to loop back with you on. And again, as we said before, this is certainly a challenging time, and OMB is very, and the administration is very much focused on fiscal responsibility and meeting those challenges that are ahead of us. And so, again, I think we are constantly evaluating all of our agency needs across the board, whether those are funded with ARP dollars, whether those are funded with city tax levy, whether those programs need additional funding. So, we're sort of happy to work with you on understanding what those priorities are and how we can work together to sort of meet those challenges.
Okay, I mean, for me, if I'm at OMB, my main concern here is what is the plan for dealing with recurring expenses that will still exist once the federal money is expired. There's really not much more important than that. One-shot COVID testing, T2, if all that stuff's in the rearview mirror, the money that was allocated towards, again, temporary money for permanent programs is going to haunt us for years to come if there's not a plan there. Gail?
Our first is Councilmember Barron, and then Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you very much. This budget process is filled with major contradictions and is very convoluted, and oftentimes we are given such a microcosmic perspective of the budget, but I notice you on several occasions mentioned the overall budget, And I just found this process to be incredibly failing meeting the real human needs, as Councilmember Brewer mentioned, like affordable housing, things of this nature. Now, I know that the city doesn't have the ability to raise revenue, I think, beyond property tax and maybe some fees and fines, that most of the responsibility of revenue raising is out of the $220 billion state budget. As a state assembly member, I thought it was incredibly I can't even mention how ridiculous it was for not to raise the amount of revenue needed to maintain ourselves in spite of the federal aid. And it became a dependence on the federal aid, and the city and the state fell short on what it could have done to maintain things, even if we didn't have the federal aid or anticipating a time when the federal aid would run out. So now we have all of this poverty in black and brown neighborhoods, 30%, 40%. And here we're sitting with, isn't it 8.3 billion in the reserve budget, I believe, right? Say it so I can hear it on record.
That's correct.
Thank you. 8.3 billion in the so-called rainy day budget when it's raining every day for us. And then now the 1.9 billion still not spent out of the COVID federal money. But yet in our neighborhoods, we're dying from poverty, unemployment, crime, which is related to poverty. And we're sitting here with a $101 billion budget on the city level, a $220 billion budget on a state level, $300 and some odd billion in one state. But yet, we have all this poverty. Now, the COVID money, we knew was going to run out. and you're anticipating a 4-point-some-odd billion dollar deficit next year, roughly?
Yes.
Right, 4-point-some-odd, and here we have 1 point not spent and 8.3 billion in a reserve budget. You know, I just don't get it. And didn't we cut 3% from every agency?
The targets vary, but generally, yes.
Yes. And did they recommend another 3% even after that?
They're currently, there is a 3% PEG program in the preliminary budget. And the
Yeah, I
currently
don't
is
say
one going
peg,
on.
I say cut.
Sure.
You know, programs to eliminate the gap.
Councilmember, do you have a question?
No, no, come on now.
I'm waiting-
You,
I'm
you,
waiting for-
you and the chair went back and forth and asked your questions. I make statements and questions.
Oh, good, I'm waiting for the question.
So the question is going to come, and I know y'all don't like, anyway. The bottom line, my question is, if we have a 4-point-some-odd billion dollar deficit projected next year, we already have 8.3 billion in a reserve budget, and we didn't even spend 1.9 billion. What is your budget plan to deal with all the agencies that you cut and the poverty in black and brown communities in particular with this kind of money, so we don't suffer like we did this go around with so much money available?
Thank you for the council question, council member. So just want to state that we do fully anticipate to spend the 1.9 billion in remaining funds before those expire. In regards to the out-year gaps, you know, those are ones that we're addressing, and they are largely comparable to gaps that have existed previously. You know, I can't speak exactly to what all is going to go into closing those gaps. There are hundreds of people in OMB and across other agencies that are figuring that out currently.
And just one other real quick question. When we had, I think, a $2.9 billion gap this time, roughly?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, well, I'll help you. About 2.9 billion. So why did we cut from all the agencies when we had an unexpected revenue increase of 3-point-some-odd billion this quarter, and next year 1.5 billion increase? We had an unexpected increase of revenue of 4 billion. How do we justify cutting all the agencies with an unexpected revenue increase of nearly $4 billion?
Again, I can't speak to exactly how the approach that was taken and is being taken for closing the gap. There's a lot that goes into it. You know, we're always looking for savings and finding efficiencies, and additionally, there's often revenue.
All right, thank you very much. But see, Madam Chair, this is why I don't like asking questions, because you get those kinds of answers that say nothing, and then I sat here, instead of making a statement to let my colleagues know what's going down, I got to sit here and ask a question he's not going to answer, but with something general.
I hear you 100%, Councilmember. Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you and good morning. The first question I have is the Comptroller's report explains how other cities have spent or plan to spend federal relief dollars on infrastructure projects. Can you discuss examples of infrastructure projects that other cities have undertaken using federal relief funds?
Good to see you always.
So thank you, Councilmember, for the question. Again, I can't really speak to how other municipalities have chosen to utilize their ARP state and local fiscal recovery funds. With regards to how we're utilizing our funding, you know, a lot of that is really directly related to operational services. That said, you know, we are, again, constantly looking at ways to maximize the amount of federal revenue that we receive across the board. And, you know, I think we've used sort of our experience in managing a lot of the infrastructure money that we received with Hurricane Sandy and managing all of the federal funding rules and regulations that come along with the COVID-19 funds. You know, that serves as a template for the way that the city approaches federal funding across the board. And so a lot of the expertise that we've built up internally within the city is being leveraged in those conversations around things like infrastructure bill, around things around the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think we have greatly expanded our own internal capacity in the last decade. And I think looking back at where we started in Hurricane Sandy, there was a very small handful of folks who focused long-term on grants management, specifically on federal funding. And I think nowadays, we're upwards of 30 plus staff that are dedicated to management of those funds. And that's not counting sort of the agency staff as well as other folks who maybe aren't doing it full time, but are spending a significant amount of time working on federal-related programs. And that certainly pays dividends when it comes to future federal funds and our ability to, again, secure a lot of those dollars and just building off of sort of the relationships that we've built with our federal grantors across the board.
And many other cities use ARPA funds not just to make up for loss of revenue or address COVID's economic effects, but to fund innovative programs like violence interruption or update infrastructure. What resources do we have left to use in this manner, and how does OMB weigh the pros and cons of spending federal aid on such programs as opposed to compensating for declines in revenue?
Again, looking at what's been spent to date and what remains to be spent, so $3.9 billion has been spent with a remainder of $1.9 billion. Again, we're looking at all of our needs across the board holistically as part of our budget and financial plan process. Certainly understand the challenges that people are facing in their day-to-day lives around public safety, around some of the challenges that sort of trickle down from sort of these broader economic issues as well. So again, we're sort of working with all of our agencies to try to understand what the needs are and how we can best address those issues. And secondarily, looking at those funding streams that sort of provide the most efficient way to do that, right? And, it may be ARP funds, it may be city tax levy, but again, we don't necessarily look first at the federal funding stream before we make a decision. We're looking holistically across the board, across all of our agencies to really understand where our priorities are.
And then my last question is around the fiscal cliff. So a portion of the federal COVID relief funding was allocated for recurring expenses not necessarily linked to the pandemic that will likely continue past the expiration date for the usage of these federal funds. At the time these funds were originally budgeted, the administration stated that it wholly expected that by the time these funds expired, the city's revenues would have grown to such a point that the city would have enough of its own funds to replace the expiring federal funds. Unfortunately, most economic outlooks, including OMB's, does not foresee much growth in the city's revenue over the next few years. Additionally, recent high levels of inflation have also reduced the purchasing power of the dollars the city does collect, making the loss of these federal dollars that much more dire. Can you provide the council with a summary of how much federal relief dollars currently planned is allocated for recurring expenses that will continue on past the expiration of the federal relief dollars? And does the administration have a plan for dealing with these expenses post-expiration of the federal relief dollars?
So thank you for your question, Council Member. Again, similar to the follow-up that we'll do with Councilmember Brannan, certainly happy to follow up with you and your team. Just again, going back to sort of the concept of how OMB approaches the budget. Again, we're looking holistically across all of our agencies, across all of the needs, and trying to really understand what our priorities are and how we can each address each of the unique situations for each of the programs that we're looking at. So again, certainly think that ARP has been a really incredibly valuable tool in helping us to balance our budget, particularly coming out of the COVID-19 health emergency. But as my colleague James has stated, this is one tool within our toolbox, and I think the real challenges that we face are really going to require us to sort of explore all options on the table. And I don't think that, unfortunately, the ARP funding is a cure-all for, I think, some of the challenges that we're facing. which go well beyond the COVID-19 health emergency. But certainly, again, we're looking at every resource that we have available to us in order to make sure that we're able to meet sort of the priorities of the administration and the council.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
Pulling from the same report by the State Comptroller's Office, they reported that the city had spending money much more faster than peer cities. The city had obligated 86% of the SLFRF funds it had received. Do you have any thoughts on that analysis? Is there a particular reason why we've sort of spent the money down pretty rapidly?
Sure. So I think a couple of things to note in sort of that report. Again, I can't speak to the specifics of the individual numbers, but broadly speaking, you know, every municipality has a different situation coming out of the COVID-19 health emergency. As you know, we were the epicenter to begin with, and some of the costs and the challenges that we faced, you know, far outstrip sort of what we see in other municipalities. So again, the real benefit of the way that the ARP state and local fiscal recovery funds was designed was really allowing for us to sort of meet the unique challenges as it relates to the types of issues that we face. Again, all the funding must be spent before the end of calendar year 2024. We are on track to do that and don't have any concerns about being able to meet our obligations to utilize all the federal funding to the fullest extent possible. But certainly, again, happy to work with the council to understand what priorities are and how we can sort of align sort of this funding stream as well as other funding streams with those priorities.
Okay, I want to turn some of my questions to relief funding for DSS. According to IBO's dashboard for the Department of Social Services, was allocated over $500 million in COVID relief funding. What was the total amount of pandemic-related federal relief funding allocated to DHS and HRA? And the reason why I want to turn my attention to that is I think everyone can underscore the challenges we have as a city, so really wanting to understand the funding that was given to that agency.
Sure. If you can just give me 1 second. We will need to sort of, I don't want to give you sort of the wrong answers on your question. We'll need to follow up with you with more details, but broadly speaking, as it relates to the allocation for DHS, the main funding, the main programs that are funded are related to the Cleanup Corps as well as street homeless programming. With regards to DSS, again, there's a small allocation related to Cleanup Corps, funding related to anti-harassment and tenant protection, food assistance, fair fares, community hubs, as well as rental assistance. But we'll circle back with you to give you more detail.
Do you have a total amount?
We'll have to circle back with more detailed information. So the overall allocations to DHS is $132.2 million, and then for DSS, $514.4 million, and that's with regards to the ARP state and local fiscal recovery funds. But we'll circle back with you for more detail on the specific program breakdown.
So you're unable to provide a breakdown in total amount by major spending areas. So you listed the spending areas: cleanup, street homelessness, anti-harassment, fair fares. And you named a few others. Are you able to give us a breakdown of each? How much money?
Sure, we can circle back with you on that.
So are you able to give us a breakdown, total number, amount by funding source, FEMA, ARPA, CARES, et cetera?
Again, I don't have that information readily available, but happy to circle back with you and your staff to provide that.
So is there any more money left to be spent to specifically efforts related to DSS, HRA, and DHS, encompassing those two departments as well?
Again, I think we as an administration are constantly evaluating federal funding opportunities. With regards to the ARP SLFRF funds, it's sort of only what we've sort of stated, right? There's 3.9 billion spent, 1.9 remaining to be spent. Much of that has been allocated. We continue to work with our federal grantors across many of the other funding streams.
No,
So-
I know, I heard you repeat that a few times. I just want to know specifically for DSS, do you know if any funding remains to be allocated to them?
Again, I can't speak to any specific funding determinations for the future. Again,
Councilmember, we'll get that number.
Okay.
I promise you.
I mean, they're building Hercs like every other day. Like, there's been a lot of money going to these agencies, and we're having this very important hearing to discuss the allocation. So it's like probably one of the most pressing things that our city is facing. So I really do hope we get the numbers.
we'll be happy to follow up with you.
Thank you. We've been joined by Council Members Joseph and Yeager, and Council Member Farias has a question.
Hi, good morning, folks. And I've been debating on whether or not I tap into this because there's a lot of numbers, a lot of acronyms, and I'm trying to make sure I ask the right thing. So if you've already stated this, my apologies. I see here with the SLFRF funds, and can you just reiterate what has been utilized already? I see there's 820 remains uncommitted. 820 million remains uncommitted, 3.68 billion of that has already been spent.
Sure.
So can you just go down that one more time and then I
Yeah,
can
so
get
a
into my
top line
question?
number, again, we received 5.88 billion in total ARP, state and local fiscal recovery funds. As of the end of fiscal year 22, 2.9 billion has been spent, with 1.9 billion remaining to be spent.
Okay, so the 1.9 is the number that we're on. And then I do want to second Councilmember Williams' statement about DSS. I mean, DSS, HRA, all of these folks are really not servicing our communities right now. And so if there are any funds that are being allocated there, we'd really like to see that breakdown. The question I had particularly was around I suppose now the 1.9 that's unallocated, and kind of towards what Chair Brennan had stated earlier with future planning or how we spent these dollars. With our current green infrastructure goals that we have as a city, why haven't we been more focused on the permanency of where these dollars are going, and like more specifically the permanency towards our goals and these dollars? I'm having a hard time understanding where all those money went during the emergency part of all of this versus catering to the emergency and towards our future goals of sustainability in this city. I mean, the first thing I think of obviously is housing always, but even more so, we have tons of buildings that have to be retrofit that would add towards our green goals, that would provide stable housing, and that could actually add to more of our housing stock throughout the city. And so that's one example, but can you give us a better idea of, if you can, if there were any considerations towards where the dollars were going in an emergency space versus also looking at in conjunction these things that are running in parallel, like our green goals?
Sure. So, thank you for the thoughtful question, Councilmember. I think there's a couple things to unpack on that one. First, with regards to just providing more detail on how we're spending the dollars. Again, I think we're very much committed to transparency and making additional enhancements to our tracker in order to provide more clarity on how that funding is being allocated by our agencies and by programs. Again, just to clarify some of the numbers again, 1.9 is the amount remaining to be spent. Of that amount, roughly half of that has been already allocated, with the remainder being looked at as part of our financial plan process. So again, as part of the financial plan process, we're looking holistically across the board. We're looking at all of our agencies. We're looking at all of our different funding streams. And I certainly can appreciate the focus on green infrastructure and climate change and sustainability. And that is something that, you know, in my more than 10 years in managing grants for the city, we have spent a lot of time building capacity internal to the city, both at OMB, at our agencies, at emergency management, you know, the various mayor's offices of climate, environmental justice. So we've worked very, very closely with them in the past decade to build that capacity, and not just looking at or limiting ourselves to just this COVID funding, but looking at sort of the broader opportunities that are out there. I think a lot of the lessons that were learned from Hurricane Sandy directly inform both the internal city processes, but also the relationships and the programs that exist at the federal level have been really based off of a lot of the lessons learned from Sandy. We were very much a leader in sort of that climate change mitigation space. And again, we own a large part of that discussion with our federal grantors. So when we're looking at the broader federal funding strategy around things like the infrastructure bill, around things like the Inflation Reduction Act, around sort of these permanent baseline programs at the federal level, we're already having those conversations with our federal grantors. So again, we're looking across the board holistically at all of our needs across the city's budget, and really trying to determine what the best fit for each of those programs are. Sometimes it certainly does make sense for us to, and we certainly want to leverage the federal dollars as much as possible in that space, but happy to continue that conversation to talk more broadly about that.
Yeah, I would love that offline, and I'll just say for the record, like our Mitchells, our HDFCs, our cooperative housing, our condos, our co-op owners, though on the macro, the larger scheme of sustainability and like green infrastructure, we're trying to tackle with like storm resiliency or waterfront access, all of that. These homeowners that are on fixed incomes need to be included in where this funding goes and how we support them in upgrading, their current housing. So I'm happy to talk offline.
We have been joined by Councilmember Krishnan, and Councilmember Moyer is on the Zoom. I have to understand something. The commingling is a problem. So when we're talking, if we still have $920 million to be allocated, which is, I think, what you said, then I still want to understand what's the process for that, because with these needs related to COVID, from mental health to housing to green jobs, the list is endless. How is that going to be decided? It's not going to be revenue replacement, I assume, or it is, or it's not, nobody really knows yet. How is, because that's what people want to know. We've allocated X, we have Y to allocate. Our needs are absolutely phenomenal. Recession is imminent. I know it's challenging, but what is the process for this future money?
Sure. I think take a step back and look at a couple different things within your question. Again, sort of the decisions around ARP do not happen in a vacuum, right? It's made in the larger context of our financial plan, right? It's incorporated into understanding what our gap numbers are and what the out years look like. So as part of the financial plan process, in working with the city council, in working with the city agencies, we are trying to understand what the true needs are from our agencies, what are the priorities as an administration, what is the council's priorities, in order to make decisions about
We can tell you our priorities.
In order to better understand sort of what programs we really want to fund, right? With regards to just the discussion about revenue replacement, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds of federal regulations. Largely like we were talking about as it relates to FDNY and sort of those large chunks of allocations, right? Those were done in order to minimize doing extra work in order to maintain those federal funds. So revenue replacement represents not necessarily like a strong programmatic decision, but in many ways an efficiency decision, right? Which is, revenue replacement from a reporting standpoint, from a federal compliance standpoint, represents one of the easiest ways for us to meet the federal requirements. And again, it certainly recognized the challenge and sort of understanding how all the moving pieces of the budget fit together. But ultimately, our goals, as we've stated many times, have been to maximize the amount of federal revenue, and that means holding on to as much of it as possible. So to the extent that we can find an easy way to spend the money in a compliant fashion while also balancing all these other things, it may not always be the case where, something that is, say, a clear COVID recovery funding project may not be funded with ARP, state and local fiscal recovery funds, right? Money is fungible. We may make decisions to use that funding in ways that allow us to balance the books, but may free up dollars in other places that, those programs can be funded with city tax levy dollars. And so we're certainly committed to being, again, transparent in how we're making those decisions, in, being clear on how we're reporting the current state of the allocations and spending through our tracker, but certainly, again, see the financial plan process as a big sort of piece in that overall discussion, right? Again, all the ARP decisions are reflected via, we make some small changes at the margins around allocations within agencies, but the large changes in the ARP funds are part of the financial plan process and are included as part of initiatives, each financial plan that we make an adjustment.
Okay, the other question I have is, and this is something that I should probably know, but are some of these funds have or will be used for matching, or is this not appropriate?
At this point, none of these funds are, as far as I'm aware, are
Matching.
are tied to being used for match, but I'm happy to follow up and get back to you to confirm.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Christian?
Thank you so much, Chairs Brewer and Brannan, for today's hearing, and thank you all from IBO for testifying too. And I just had a question for you all. In general, and I appreciate the discussion publicly about the COVID funds and the way they were spent. But I also want to humanize it a bit too. And I think there's been a lot of discussion and testimony from OMB and IBO just in overall about the money that's come in, how it must be spent. The reality though is stimulus funds may not be there forever. To the extent they do dry up, that shouldn't be an excuse to roll back critical programs that have depended on them that continued. I think one thing the pandemic has shown us really is not that there were things that required emergency funding, but that there are instances and significant areas and gaps in our city budget that required funding for decades before, because they weren't funded, created large systemic inequalities that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. And so my concern more is to translate the spending and dollars and cents into actual human lives and programs that are impacted. And so to that extent, if there are gaps, if there are stimulus funds that are drying up as well, what are the parameters for spending from the rainy day fund for the city budget?
We'd have to get back to you on the exact legal requirements that go into allowable uses of the rainy day fund. That was set by state legislation, and then which followed the charter revision. So I don't want to misspeak, but there are specific thresholds and triggers that have to be hit before that can be utilized. So we'd have to follow up on the specifics there.
Mm-hmm. And just maybe to answer the broader question about the stimulus dollars and the future of some of these recurring programs. I don't want to give the impression that when stimulus dollars end, that all these programs just stop, right? Again, I think there are lots of different programs within our entire portfolio. And as we said, we are looking at the budget holistically. We are looking at what the needs are across the board, across all of our agencies, to understand what the priorities are. And we look forward to continuing to work with council as part of our financial plan process to make sure that we're working together on our shared priorities.
And I do appreciate that, but I also think that obviously the reports have been wide about the pegs across agencies and the way in which stimulus funds are not, in some areas are temporary and may not last. And so I just urge you all to consider too, there's an asylum seeker crisis that we're facing that is not going away anytime soon. It's going to go up more drastically in scope, whether or not there are new asylum seekers coming in or the current ones here who need significant social support and services. We obviously are facing a crisis with our schools and education dollars as well. And I would be hard pressed to identify another situation that is more economically dire in what we face going forward than the current one. And so if there are instances where it makes sense to look carefully at the rainy day fund or other ways of increasing spending rather than cutting back, because I don't think austerity measures should be an important part of this. I think the way to help recover is to spend, especially on social services programs that require it. I'd urge you all to take that very seriously too, rather than cut back at this time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember. And your continued advocacy on the state and federal levels for funding to address the crisis is much appreciated. Thank you.
Councilmember Sanchez is on Zoom, and Councilmember Brennan has another question.
Thank you, Chair. Has any of the federal relief funds been accessed for the migrant crisis?
So with regards to some of the discussions that we've had, at this point, we're at a point where we're still continuing to work with our federal partners in Washington, both in Congress and in the White House. There's been, I believe, very, very limited support through, I think, some very small plus-ups through existing programs. But again, I think certainly share your concerns about the asylum seekers, and happy to follow up as part of a separate conversation.
But has any of that 13.3 billion been leveraged for the crisis right now?
I'd have to follow up with you on that, but I don't believe so.
And there's no update on getting further money from FEMA?
What I can say there is that we're in constant discussion with FEMA headquarters about potential support. Also with our electeds in Washington, as well as the White House. Certainly, it is a very challenging issue, and as of yet, we have not gotten any firm support, but are continuing to have those discussions.
I mean, how can we be helpful there? What is the main reluctance?
I mean, I think that, not to speak for the federal government, but I think, help or advocacy with, with the federal entities up there, with FEMA and the other such entities, as well as with the administration to, I can't speak to their reluctance myself, but I think just generally pushing for either language to be included in the soon-to-come, budget extension or continuing resolution, or advocacy with the agencies that already have the authority and the funding to provide assistance to New York City. Either of those outlets would be appreciated.
Something specific. I believe that the administration swapped approximately $500 million in our city tax levy from correction to free up city tax dollars for other purposes. We talked about this earlier. So are you able, for other agencies, to see which ones received swapped city tax dollars from correction, and then a breakdown of the funds in other agencies that had city tax levy dollars swapped with COVID relief funds? It's back to this issue of more specifics than what we've been able to get today.
Yeah, so just, again, going back to sort of those top line numbers, right? So 5.88 billion, 3.9 spent, 1.9 remaining to be spent.
Correct.
The
We've all got them memorized, just like you now.
1.9.
And 900, don't forget about my 920 million. Go ahead, unallocated.
So that funding has yet to be reallocated. It's part of that number.
Okay.
And again, with regards specifically to corrections, right? This
No S, correction.
correction. There was sort of no budgetary impact or operational impact to the agency. It was purely
Swap.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think we will have lots of questions in terms of a follow-up, unless you have any others right now. We appreciate this. We'll listen to IBO. I think there are several specifics that we're going to be asking for. We thank you very much. But we would like to have a say as a city council, the 920 million. We'd love to have some input into how it gets spent. Because if you could, I know we heard green jobs, I talked housing, I would say mental health, just to give you another place. You may not, sometimes with OMB, in my experience, I understand this, you do what is appropriate for OMB, but I suggest that you also say what's appropriate. Sometimes the agencies, what's expedient for them, and I understand that. But we've got to think of ways that is expedient and helpful to the residents of New York City. And mental health would take care of a lot of need. I suggest that. Not to mention anything else. Please think of that as opposed to what's expedient for your agencies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is IBO.
Good morning.
Before you begin, I'll just swear you in. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions? Logan Clark.
I do.
Brian P. Kane.
I do.
Thank you. You may begin.
All right. Good morning, Chair Brannon, Chair Brewer, and members of the City Council Committees on Finance and Oversight and Investigations. My name is Logan Clark, and I am the Assistant Director of Budget Review at the New York City Independent Budget Office, and I am joined today by our Budget Review Analyst, Brian Kane. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about the status of the city's allocation of federal COVID-19 stimulus funds. In our testimony, we will briefly describe the component parts of stimulus dollars made available to the city, address how much of that has been claimed as of the close of fiscal year 2022, and how much is currently budgeted for future years. We will also discuss how IBO tracks ongoing expenditures tied to stimulus funds through our federal COVID relief spending dashboard, as well as some challenges associated with that tracking due to inconsistent use of stimulus-specific budget structures by some agencies. To begin, just over $13.5 billion in federal COVID-19 stimulus funds have been made available to New York City. This is comprised of $5.9 billion in unrestricted state and local fiscal relief funds from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, ARPA SLF-RF, as we've heard, and $7.2 billion in restricted education aid. Of the dedicated education funding, $4.8 billion is authorized through ARPA, otherwise known as ARPA Education, and $2.4 is through the Coronavirus and Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021, more briefly known as CRSA. The education stimulus is mostly earmarked for spending by the city's Department of Education, with some funds restricted for the City University of New York. The city has also received smaller awards totaling around $380 million for transportation, remote learning technology, and Section 8 housing vouchers. Our comments today, however, will be limited to the $13.1 billion awarded through ARPA SLF-RF, ARPA Education, and CRSA. At the close of fiscal year 2022, and unless we specify otherwise, from here on out, any years will be noted as fiscal years. The city has claimed more than $6.9 billion in these stimulus funds to cover costs per the city's financial management system. That includes $1.2 billion in 2021 and $5.7 billion in 2022. The city has not yet claimed any stimulus funds for fiscal year 2023. These numbers will differ somewhat from what we show on our dashboard on our website, and we'll get into that briefly. Of the $6.2 billion remaining to be claimed, $4.1 billion are earmarked for educational purposes, and $2 billion are unrestricted in their use. As of the release of the 2023 adopted budget, the city has budgeted $4.7 billion across these funding sources from 2023 to 2025. A breakout of where those funds are currently budgeted is available in our federal spending dashboard. This means that roughly $1.5 billion of the city's federal stimulus award has neither been claimed nor has it been currently budgeted for spending in this fiscal year or future fiscal years. This includes $1.1 billion in unrestricted federal aid and $383 million in education-specific funding relief, broken down between $280 million for DOE and $103 million for CUNY. And just a quick note on that, since we did hear different numbers from OMB, we are going off of numbers that were as of the release of the adopted budget. They may have added funding in between now and then, so just in terms of discrepancies. I'd also like to now speak about IBO's federal COVID relief spending dashboard, the data that we are able to present there, and what we are unable to present due to the inconsistent use of stimulus-specific budget structures by some agencies. IBO's dashboard allows the public to understand how much the city has budgeted in its stimulus funds and how much of those funds have been spent thus far. For this, we rely on data from OMB. We update how much the city is budgeted, delineated by agencies and programs, each time the city releases a financial plan. Those budgeted amounts are based on dedicated budget structures that OMB has created for federal stimulus funding. We also update our dashboard weekly with actual spending data based again upon those dedicated budget structures that we have received from OMB. We assume that the city will claim a commensurate amount of stimulus funds for reimbursement, or a very close amount, to cover the spending in those dedicated codes. Our dashboard does not currently reflect how much of the federal and city, or how much of the federal aid the city has claimed to cover that spending, because these figures are typically unavailable until the end of a fiscal year. Therefore, IBO's dashboard presents what OMB says it will do. The budgeted amounts are what OMB expects to spend, and the spending amounts are what we can expect to see in claims. In preparation for this testimony, and based on data in the recently released annual comprehensive financial report from the Comptroller's Office, IBO has conducted an analysis to see if the city is claiming federal stimulus revenues to match expenditure amounts in those dedicated structures. IBO has performed this analysis to determine how much of the federal stimulus has been used, and in turn, how much is remaining for current and future fiscal years. According to IBO's dashboard, the city has spent $6.8 billion during the fiscal years 2021 and 2022, while the city has claimed $6.9 billion, revealing a small difference between our dashboard and claims. Our dashboard additionally shows that the city has spent an additional $1.9 billion in 2023 thus far, which would bring the total spending close to $9 billion to date. Going forward, IBO is planning to add claims data when available to our dashboard to allow the city to see what we have actually been reimbursed by the federal government. However, in addition to the somewhat small differences between claims and spending, IBO has identified some larger anomalies between the claims and the budgeted amounts as of the adopted plan. The attached table shows the final adopted budget amounts for each revenue source as of the 2022 adopted budget, and the reimbursement amounts that were described by OMB as being tagged to a specific agency. While most of the agencies have revenue claims that match or are close to the allocated stimulus funding, there are several that stand out. And just for everyone's clarification, there are often very perfectly good reasons why the adopted budget funding allocation does not match the claimed revenue for the closing fiscal year. An agency might not spend as much as it anticipated, or it may switch federal funding sources, i.e. from federal stimulus funds to FEMA public assistance. However, in the instance of the Department of Correction, the financial plan accompanying the 2023 adopted budget included $533 million in anticipated stimulus funding for fiscal year 2022, yet when the financial books were closed 3 months later, they had only claimed $1.3 million. This is not to say that they did not spend $532 million. Stimulus dollars, as noted, are a fungible pot of money that may be reallocated elsewhere, and a dollar is a dollar in the general fund, whether it is federally or locally sourced. It is, however, an issue of budget transparency and one of opportunity cost. The budget negotiated between City Council and the mayor in June assumed an allocation of federal funding to various agencies, yet as of the close of the fiscal year, that allocation has shifted, and for at least one agency, substantially. To be clear, those dollars are not lost. The city could add them to the budget right now. However, by allocating those funds to 2022 in the 2023 adopted budget plan, it precluded their ability to be a part of the budget for fiscal years 2023 or out. Which is to say that during the adopted budget negotiations, there were $533 million less dollars in stimulus funds to address city needs in current and future fiscal years. Additionally, it should not require deep insider knowledge to ascertain how much an agency has received in funding or how much it is intending to claim. Our analysis allocating ARPA SLF-RF claims to agencies required IBO to use an unpublished and unverifiable descriptive field in an obscure accounting report, making it far more difficult to assess revenues after the close of the fiscal year. Conversely, on the expenditure side, both DOE and CUNY budget their anticipated claims outside of OMB-established naming conventions and funding sources, making it more difficult to assess stimulus usage in real time. All of this information could be more readily presented by the administration. And we wanted to speak on DOE specifically. At the end of the fiscal year, DOE had claimed $2.9 billion of its $6.9 billion education or allocation for from education restricted funding sources. Of the unspent funds, $3.7 billion has been budgeted for 23 through 2025, leaving about $280 million in unbudgeted funds that must be used by DOE. Note that our dashboard will present this number as $317 million. This difference is because DOE has claimed an additional $37 million more in 2022 than their agency recorded as spending in those stimulus budget codes. In addition to education-specific funding, DOE also claimed about $400 million from the unrestricted ARPA SLF RF funds in FY22. In closing, I want to reiterate the key takeaways of our testimony. One, the city has roughly $1.5 billion in remaining to budget across the 2023 to 2025 window, including $1.1 billion in unrestricted funds and $383 million in funds restricted for educational use. And again, that's $280 for DOE and $103 million for CUNY. Two, IBO recommends that the city adhere to its own guidelines and budget stimulus funding in a way that allows the public to easily know how much each agency is allocated to spend and how much they will end up claiming at the end of the fiscal year. Finally, if there is a significant difference between an agency's allocation and their year-end claims, the administration should provide a reconciliation of that variance. We thank you for the opportunity to testify today and are ready to answer your questions.
Thank you. Is there a serious concern from IBO with regard to the administration or the prior administration allocating temporary funds to permanent programs?
I would say at this point in time, as the administration has noted, these are a fungible source of funds. And so for all intents and purposes, the dollars are dollars are dollars, regardless of whether or not we're putting them towards operating programs, as the city has widely done. Those funds will need to be used in some form or another. So I think while we have specifically allocated them to these programs currently, they are in effect opening up city dollars for other programs elsewhere. And so regardless of the particular funding source, I think that we will be dealing with a revenue shortfall. But I don't think that it's specifically as programmatic as the questions have been asked.
But you would agree that that there is a delta between the federal relief funds that have been allocated and ultimately that's been allocated to recurring expenses, that when that federal money runs out and expires, we're going to be left holding the bag to continue funding those recurring expenses.
Yeah, the way that we've sort of have looked at this is around IBO's office, we sort of describe as the Christmas check from grandma, right? And so it's not something that is going to get re-upped, and so it will naturally lead to a fiscal cliff at some point in time when that comes around. The hope here is, I think, that the city uses it in such a fashion that revenues continue to rebound, but I think that's something that we would have to wait on.
I think you mentioned a couple of times that it's hard sometimes to get this data. So we talked about the law, we talked about commingling, and I just was wondering if you could give us maybe in sort of a listing of some of the difficulties you have faced in trying to track this money, because I think it's a universal problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I'm big on data, and this seems to be challenging.
Absolutely, and it is quite the task. The best way to think about this is that there are three buckets that matter when we're tracking this spending. We have the budgeted amounts, which will limit your amount of spending. Yeah. You have the actual spending amounts, and then we have the revenues, which are separate from those and not directly tied, but things that we eventually claim for reimbursement. And so that's what really matters in the prior fiscal years. So when we talk about that $3.86 billion that the city has claimed in ARPA SLF RF, that's based on the received revenue. And so, that's what we're sort of counting as the total spend against. The issue is that we're relying on naming conventions that have been established by guidance from OMB and have, as Christopher Blanco noted, have been issued to all of the agencies. The agencies don't necessarily always follow that. If you look at the funding in DOE, they might budget those funds in codes that are labeled CR for COVID relief, but they might not have the attached revenue sources to those, and so it would end up showing as a city fund hit in the budget, even though they are designated as a CR code. This is really inside baseball, but we can show you examples of that. Some of the other issues, as we noted, in terms of the final budget amounts that were set out during the adopted financial plan, those don't always match the receivables. And like I said, there's often perfectly good reasons for that, but the administration should provide a reconciliation that's showing either, lower payables for that, or they should decide to, or show us their decisions that went into reallocating those funds from somewhere.
Okay. The other question is, I know this may not, because this is forward thinking, but I am now focused on this $920 million. How do you see OMB distributing this? Is it what OMB stated today, which is we're going to talk to the agencies? This is what I call the overview without much specifics, to put it mildly. And then we're going to listen to them, and then we're going to see what's, blah, blah, blah. Is that how it's normally done? Do you think it should be done differently because of the future challenges that we have in terms of revenue, et cetera, et cetera?
Absolutely. So I think broadly speaking, that generally is the process, right? The agencies will be reaching out, and OMB will be assessing funding gaps at particular agencies. And it's often a lot easier to fill a gap with dollars that aren't your own than filling it with your own. And so I think on that end, there is a great degree of flexibility afforded by the SLFRF funds. And generally speaking, we do see it allocated towards operating and ongoing expenditures. And so I think from a purely accounting and compliance standpoint, that's generally fine. I think there's nothing prohibiting the city from using those funds for basically any use, right? They're relatively unrestricted in their use. I don't think I would necessarily say that IBO has a position on how they should be used, but it's just more.
It's the process more and the transparency too. That's
I
I'm
believe,
getting that.
Yeah, and there's certain ways that it's budgeted, and the way that the revenue is tracked is it's budgeted completely in the mayoralty. And so if you look at the ACFR the comptroller just released, you'll see that all of the revenue that we're claiming for fiscal year 2022 is accruing to the mayoralty. So you're not able to break that out between the different agencies that received it. You'd have to go back and check the expenditures in CR codes and see if that lines up. However, the analysis that we did to really get towards that was really looking at an unpublished field that I don't know how many of you use Venmo or a Cash App or write in the memo line on your checks, but that's essentially what we had to do, was go through and say, oh, this is for so-and-so, we'll go from there. And so we're extracting data from an open text field in FMS. I don't think that it should necessarily be that way. I think it should be a lot easier
No, it
for
shouldn't.
the public to understand where their dollars are going. And so I would say that in terms of that process, there are ways that they can budget this a little bit differently to make it more transparent. And to note, they do this already with the CURSA funding. If you look at CURSA funding, it is discretely budgeted on the revenue side between CUNY and DOE. So I can say, all right, we've got all of our CURSA funding. This is CURSA funding that accrued directly to DOE. This is CURSA funding that accrued directly to CUNY. But we're not able to tell that with the ARPA funds. And so That's historically been the way that OMB has budgeted a lot of the federal, sort of larger federal funding sources. CDB GDR is budgeted that way. FEMA public assistance is generally budgeted that way. But again, there creates these transparency issues, and then also creates difficulties for the administration when they're trying to figure out how much did we actually assign to this particular agency.
Okay. And no, this is in the weeds, but in your trackers, they're very easy to read, except what's the difference between unspent and unbudgeted in your tracker?
So that's something that we're actually going to be adding clarification on going forward. Unspent is actually budgeted unspent. So it's been allocated to fiscal year 23 through 25. Unbudgeted is specific to either we could only look at that at the citywide total or within DOE, because we don't know which agencies the SLFRF funds are going to until they've been budgeted. But that is that equates to the I believe the 920 million that OMB was referencing. Our number is a little different because we include a couple different other funding sources, but that's equivalent to what hasn't been allocated.
Okay, that's very helpful to me. Okay.
Yeah, the unspent is effectively the uncommitted balance if you're looking directly at FMS.
Okay.
The city used a large portion of its federal funds to replace the city tax levy in a few agencies. What does IBO think of the wisdom behind the choices that were made? And there's a significant amount of funding for sanitation, fire, corrections. What do you make of the wisdom behind those decisions?
I don't think we would necessarily take a position on the allocation of those, mostly because, again, they're fungible dollars. And so, city spending is city spending is city spending. What really sort of comes in on the tail end is just that revenue. And so when you do allocate those dollars out, it's really just freeing up city tax levy elsewhere. It's to sort of go back to that metaphor of grandma's check from Christmas. It's, that goes directly into your bank account, and then you go out and you have lunch. Did grandma buy you lunch, or did she help pay your rent? And that's sort of the issue that we have here, is that from a purely compliance standpoint, and I don't think it necessarily matters as much. I do think that it probably matters more from a political standpoint, but I don't, from a purely budget standpoint, I don't think that it's necessarily much of an issue.
What's the number one thing you think should have been done differently?
I think really just in terms of transparency, we should be budgeting this, but in terms of the revenue, it should actually be accruing to those agencies. I think that would go a long way to making things a little bit more easy to understand. I think that if we're budgeting things in the designated codes, so you should also have the revenue attached to them. Mostly because we have to make an assumption at a certain point in time. If you say that, we're budgeting all of these things in these COVID-related codes, but then you don't have the revenue attached to it, I have to make the assumption that you're actually going to make the revenue good on that, right? And so I think from that perspective, that's something that we'd like to see more of on the transparency side. But again, on the allocation side, I think it's mostly less of a programmatic issue that we would take a stand on.
So did you bring some of your, I don't know if you call them transparency issues, to the attention of OMB, or IBO doesn't do that? Because you had a good list here, which makes me angry or upset or whatever.
This was an analysis that we managed to get done late last week after the release of the ACFR. We haven't raised our concerns with OMB yet, but I think that it's something that we will likely be doing in the future.
Great. We've been joined by Councilmember Wan. Thank you very much. We appreciate IBO for all of your efforts. One of the greatest things that was done out of the 1989 charter reform was IBO, since I was there and watched it. And you've been great ever since. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're free to go, and then we'll see if there's anybody else who's going to testify from the public.
Thank you, chairs. It's now time for public testimony. I don't believe we have anyone here in person who signed up to testify, and there's no members of the public on the Zoom. And so with that, I'll turn it back to our chairs to close it out.
So we thank those from the agencies and IBO, and we will be following up with questions. This is an incredibly important topic, and as we indicated, we will be having a hearing in the near future, November 16th, on education and federal dollars, and it's always a pleasure to participate with my colleague, Councilmember Justin Brandon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for participating in this hearing, and we will adjourn.